It's time for Assad to get out of the way.
The only way to bring stability and peace to Syria is going to be for Assad to step down.
We condemn this indiscriminate killing, and it is just further evidence that Assad has to go.
We sat by and did relatively nothing, despite what the administration may claim.
The president, for perfectly understandable reasons, really has wanted to keep this problem at arm's length. He really has wanted it to disappear.
I've been crossing over this border into Syria for the last 2.5 years and seen hundreds of these refugee camps spring up. In that time, what began as a largely peaceful protest movement has descended into an appalling civil war that's killed more than 130,000 people and displaced millions. On the eve of the latest attempt to strike a peace deal, diplomacy is being given another shot. But there's little cause for optimism. And despite their rhetoric, America and the West have failed to dislodge President Assad.
August 2011. The uprising is 5 months old. Under pressure to respond to Syria's crackdown on protesters, President Obama says Bashar al-Assad must go. 1 year later, as violence spirals, he draws a red line on chemical weapons. June 2013. The White House says the red line's been breached, but there's no major response. 2 months later, a chemical attack in Damascus kills hundreds. Obama calls on Congress to vote for military action. The following month, Syria agrees to decommission the weapons, but Obama warns the US will still act if diplomacy fails. When Barack Obama took office, he tried to reset America's relationship with the Islamic world. He was to be the president who ended wars, and he promised a new beginning, backing democratic change in the Middle East.
Thank you very much.
But Syria broke the mold. Its ethnic and religious makeup was much more complex, the region more flammable. Its government had powerful allies and friends on the UN Security Council. Critics describe a divided administration led by a president whose focus was elsewhere.
I don't think it was ever his intention that Syria would be dissolved in a humanitarian catastrophe. It was never his intention that Al-Qaeda, of all things, should arise in the eastern part of the country. It was never his intention that Syria would be sliding inexorably into a peculiar form of state failure. But all of these are consequences, unintended as they may be, of the policy that's been pursued for the last 33 months.
What began as a peaceful protest movement was met with an iron fist. President Obama, Cameron and the French and German leaders all said Assad must step aside. Sanctions were imposed, embassies closed and limited aid was given to rebel fighters. But efforts to support the opposition, pressure the Syrian regime and halt the violence produced few results on the ground.
Well, the rebels have now moved up because the government's been trying to push into this area. It's a very confused situation. We know there are snipers all around here because it's an urban area. The sounds ring out, and what you can't tell is which direction they're actually coming from.
When some in the administration wanted to give weapons to the rebels, President Obama was said to be disengaged, worried that America would become embroiled in the region again.
The president, I do not believe, understands the importance of American exceptionalism. And I don't think he appreciates that if there is a vacuum because of a withdrawal, an American withdrawal and lack of leadership, that vacuum can be filled by very, very bad people who do not hold the same standards and values of international conduct that we do.
In foreign affairs, he is persuaded that what the United States really needs to do is spend a lot more sustained attention to Asia and China. Syria has not figured in his sense of priorities, so he's really tried to keep this problem at arm's length in the hope that somehow it would solve itself.
Opposition groups supported by the West had little power on the ground. As the conflict intensified, increasingly radical fighters filled the vacuum, and the bloodshed escalated.
This is a simply appalling situation. The doctors have tried to revive this young man and failed. He's just been pronounced dead. The situation inside here is one of unbelievable chaos.
When hundreds were killed in a chemical attack last August, President Obama blamed the Syrian government and authorized military force.
Senator Lindsey Graham and I had a long meeting with the president in the Oval Office, and this was after the latest chemical attack, weapons attack by Bashar Assad. He said he wanted to do three things. One, degrade Bashar Assad's chemical weapons capability, increase support to the opposition, and reverse the momentum on the battlefield against Bashar Assad. Senator Graham and I went out, told the press we were encouraged by what the president had to say. Never again did he mention those latter two.
Did you detect that the president was looking for an alternative, a way out, not just in the words he was using, but in the way that he presented the arguments to you and Senator Graham?
I may not have thought that he was looking for a way out, but I certainly detected a lack of enthusiasm.
The president changed tack, asking a reluctant Congress to vote on military action. When Syria agreed to decommission its chemical weapons, strikes were put on hold and the vote called off. The president had to contend with a war-weary public, and the White House believes it successfully contained President Assad and brought Damascus to the negotiating table.
I've spent the last 2 years travelling inside northern Syria and essentially witnessed its descent into chaos and what is in effect a failed state. Now, critics of the administration will say that's partly as a result of the lack of Western engagement.
Our assessment has been this, that the only prospect of keeping Syria together and keeping its institutions intact and preventing a vacuum that's filled by forces that in their own way could be as bad, if not worse than Assad, is through a negotiated transition. There's one interesting development that has a good side and a very bad side. The very bad side is what you alluded to, which is the increasing prominence of extremist groups inside of Syria that clearly pose a danger today and could pose an even greater danger in the future. But on the other hand, what that's done is it's begun to concentrate the minds of critical actors outside of Syria.
If these talks actually happen, then America and Russia will have successfully brought parts of the opposition and the government of Syria together for the first time, and that will be an achievement. But those fighting on the other side of the border won't be represented, and they're unlikely to be persuaded by any deal. In effect, the lack of a cohesive policy and the interference of outside powers has allowed the war and extremism to flourish, and some fear it's diminished America's standing in the region. And crucially, the bloodshed and chaos inside Syria are unlikely to abate.